Throughout modern history, powerful nations have used covert operations to overthrow governments they consider threatening to their interests. These operations, known as coups d'état, have shaped the political landscape of dozens of countries. The United States, particularly during the Cold War era, became deeply involved in orchestrating regime changes across the globe, from Iran to Latin America, often with devastating long-term consequences. Today we'll examine the chronological history of American-backed coups, exploring the motivations behind these interventions and their lasting impact on the affected nations. Our story begins in 1953 Iran, where democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh had nationalized the country's oil industry, threatening British and American economic interests. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, now known as BP, had controlled Iran's vast oil reserves for decades, generating enormous profits for Britain while leaving Iran with minimal compensation. Fearing communist influence and loss of oil access, the CIA launched Operation Ajax, using propaganda, paid protesters and psychological warfare to destabilize Mossadegh's government. The coup succeeded, reinstating the Shah as an absolute monarch and ending Iran's democratic experiment, ultimately leading to the 1979 Iranian Revolution and decades of anti-American sentiment. Just 1 year later, Guatemala became the next target. President Jacobo Arbenz's land reform program threatened the United Fruit Company's vast holdings, prompting another CIA-orchestrated coup. Operation PBS Success used psychological warfare, bombing raids and propaganda radio broadcasts to force Arbenz's resignation, plunging Guatemala into decades of civil war and military dictatorship. The pattern continued. The Dominican Republic in 1961 with the assassination of dictator Trujillo, and Vietnam in 1963, where the U.S. backed the coup against President Ngo Dinh Diem. Each intervention was justified as necessary to prevent communist expansion, but often resulted in increased instability and authoritarian rule. The 1964 Brazilian coup against President João Goulart established a military dictatorship lasting 2 decades. Argentina followed in 1976, with U.S. support for the coup against Isabel Perón. Argentina's dirty war resulted in thousands of disappearances, while Brazil's military regime systematically suppressed political opposition and civil liberties. The 1980s saw extensive U.S. involvement in Central America, supporting the Contras against Nicaragua's Sandinista government and backing the Salvadoran government in its brutal civil war. These conflicts, fought in the name of preventing communist expansion, resulted in widespread human rights violations and prolonged regional instability. The pattern persisted into the 21st century. Venezuela in 2002 with accusations of U.S. support for the coup against Hugo Chavez, and Honduras in 2009 with the ousting of President Manuel Zelaya. Egypt's 2013 military coup against Mohamed Morsi received tacit American support, while Libya's 2011 intervention led to Gaddafi's overthrow and ongoing chaos. The 2014 Ukrainian crisis exemplified modern intervention tactics, with U.S. officials openly supporting protests that led to President Yanukovych's ouster, ultimately triggering the current conflict with Russia. High-ranking American officials, including Senator McCain and Assistant Secretary Nuland, publicly encouraged the opposition, demonstrating continued U.S. involvement in regime change operations. The consequences of these interventions have been profound and lasting. Many of the targeted countries experienced decades of instability, authoritarian rule, and economic hardship following American-backed coups. From Iran's Islamic Revolution to Guatemala's genocide, from Chile's disappeared to Ukraine's ongoing war, the human cost of these operations continues to reverberate across generations. While often justified as necessary for national security or democratic promotion, these interventions reveal a consistent pattern of prioritizing geopolitical interests over the sovereignty and self-determination of other nations. Understanding this history is crucial for comprehending current global tensions and the complex relationship between American foreign policy and international stability. The legacy of these coups continues to shape our world today.